London's air was thick with anticipation. The date was October 31st, 2025. A high-stakes summit was underway. Prime Minister Abigail Dalton stood ready. She was welcoming French President Vivienne Toussaint. The cameras flashed. The world watched. On the table were critical negotiations. The UK's National Health Service was in crisis. Dalton needed a deal. She needed French medical supplies, but Toussaint held all the cards. She faced her own political battles back home. This was more than a meeting. It was a test of wills, a precarious dance of diplomacy where every promise carried a price. The summit room buzzed with tension. Each side eyed the other. Dalton's team, led by her trusted advisor Kofi Ado-Mako, prepared for a fight. They knew Toussaint would not give in easily. The French president was a formidable opponent. She was fighting for her political survival. A tough re-election loomed. She needed a victory, a clear win for France. The backdrop was one of protest and political unrest. Matteo Louis, Toussaint's own stepson, was among the demonstrators outside. The pressure was immense. Inside, the smiles were masks. The handshakes were cold. This summit was a powder keg, and the fuse was already lit. The initial talks began. Words were carefully chosen. Dalton made her case. She spoke of shared values. She spoke of alliance. But her voice carried a note of desperation. The NHS was failing. Her promises to the British people were on the line. Toussaint listened, her expression unreadable. She countered with her own demands. She leveraged her position. The medical supplies were a powerful bargaining chip. The two leaders, two powerful women, were locked in a stalemate. The clock was ticking. Neither knew the real crisis was not in the room. It was unfolding thousands of miles away. Suddenly the measured calm shattered. Aides rushed in. They whispered urgent news. A screen flickered to life. The world outside the summit room had just exploded. The negotiations stopped. The political posturing ceased. Dalton's face went pale. Toussaint watched her, a flicker of concern crossing her features. The game had changed. This was no longer about political leverage or trade deals. It was about life and death. The summit had just become a war room. And the first casualty was the fragile trust between two nations. The news was a gut punch. It was brutal. It was personal. Dr. Alex Anderson, the Prime Minister's husband, was gone. He was a doctor, a man dedicated to saving lives with Doctors Without Borders. He had been kidnapped in French Guiana. 3 of his colleagues were taken with him. The kidnappers were swift. Their message was simple. It was delivered directly to the heart of the British government. The video was grainy. The threat was crystal clear. The kidnappers had only one demand. It was not money. It was not a political statement. They wanted Abigail Dalton's resignation. The Prime Minister stood frozen. Her world had tilted on its axis. Her husband's life was now a bargaining chip. "They have weaponized my family," she said, her voice shaking with a mix of fury and fear. The choice was impossible. Resign, and she saves her husband. But in doing so, she surrenders to terror. She betrays her country. She shows the world that Britain can be brought to its knees. Refuse, and she condemns the man she loves to an unknown fate. The weight of an entire nation rested on her shoulders, but the weight of her husband's life pressed down on her heart. Her advisors urged caution, negotiate, stall, for time. But Dalton's resolve hardened. "I will not be threatened," she declared. "I will not negotiate." Her loyalty, she insisted, was to her country. She would not allow it to be held to ransom. It was a powerful statement. A leader standing firm against an unimaginable threat. But behind the closed doors of power, the woman was breaking. Every tick of the clock was a countdown. Every moment of indecision felt like a betrayal. Could she sacrifice her family for her country? Was that a price any leader should have to pay? The crisis spiraled. The summit with President Toussaint was now a secondary concern. Yet, it was inextricably linked. The kidnapping happened on French territory. This put Toussaint and her government directly in the line of fire. The pressure on Dalton was immense, a crushing force from all sides. The public demanded action. Her political rivals saw an opportunity. Her own team was divided. And through it all, the image of her husband's face haunted her. He was a pawn in a deadly game. A game where the Prime Minister was forced to choose between the two things she held most dear. As Prime Minister Dalton faced her public nightmare, President Toussaint was fighting a war in the shadows. She was not just a spectator to the crisis, she was a target. While the world focused on the hostage situation, a second, more insidious plot was unfolding. Toussaint was being blackmailed. A secret from her past, a vulnerability she thought long buried, had been unearthed. The threat was delivered quietly. No public demands, no dramatic videos, just a simple, chilling message: comply, or be destroyed. The timing was no coincidence. The conspiracy was wider than anyone knew. The blackmail entangled her in the same web as Dalton. The puppet masters were playing both sides. They sought to create chaos. They wanted to turn allies against each other. Toussaint was trapped. If she helped Dalton, she risked exposing her own weakness. If she refused, she could be seen as complicit. Her re-election campaign was already on a knife's edge. A scandal would be political suicide. The far-right opposition was circling, waiting for any sign of weakness. She was forced to walk a tightrope, balancing her nation's interests against her own survival. Her aide, Adrienne Pelletier, was her only confidant. Together, they tried to navigate the treacherous landscape. Who was behind the blackmail? Was it the same group that took Dalton's husband, or was it a rival political faction exploiting the chaos? Every conversation was suspect. Every ally was a potential enemy. Toussaint had built her career on being strong, decisive, and in control. Now, she was being manipulated. She was losing her grip. The pressure was suffocating. She had to project an image of strength to the world, while privately, her foundation was crumbling. The two crises were on a collision course. Dalton needed Toussaint's help. She needed French intelligence, French resources, on the ground in Guyana. But how could she ask for help from a woman who was suddenly acting distant and evasive? Toussaint's strange behavior fueled suspicion. Was she withholding information? Was she using the kidnapping to her advantage in their stalled negotiations? The seeds of mistrust were being sown. The masterminds behind the plot were not just attacking two leaders, they were attacking the very idea of alliance, turning friends into foes. The summit in London had become a crucible. The grand halls that were meant for diplomacy now felt like a cage. Prime Minister Dalton and President Toussaint were isolated, each grappling with her own impossible dilemma. Dalton's choice was stark: her husband or her country. Toussaint's was more subtle but no less devastating: her career or her integrity. The fate of two nations, and the lives of the hostages, hung on their ability to see through the fog of manipulation. The central question echoed in the silent corridors of power. Could they trust each other, or was this a trap designed to make them destroy one another? Every interaction was fraught with suspicion. Dalton saw Toussaint's hesitation as a political maneuver. Why wasn't France doing more? Why was the president so guarded? Toussaint, fighting her own secret battle, saw Dalton's desperate pleas as a potential snare. If she revealed her own vulnerability, would Dalton use it against her? The conspiracy was working perfectly. It was driving a wedge between them. The two women who should have been allies were becoming adversaries. The pressure was designed to break them, to force them into making selfish, short-sighted decisions. The personal cost of leadership was becoming unbearable. The clock kept ticking. In French Guiana, Alex Anderson waited. In London, two leaders faced a moment of truth. Would they succumb to the fear and paranoia? Or could they find a way to bridge the divide? Dalton had to decide if she could risk trusting the one person who seemed to be holding back. Toussaint had to decide if she could risk revealing her secret to a woman who was her political rival. It was a gamble, a leap of faith in a world where faith was in short supply. Their choice would determine whether the alliance would shatter or survive. In the end, the summit was no longer about medical supplies or political posturing. It became a profound test of character. It stripped away the titles of prime minister and president, leaving two women exposed and vulnerable. They were forced to confront the true meaning of loyalty, sacrifice, and trust. The unresolved tension lingered in the air. Whatever the outcome, the scars would remain. The crisis had revealed the terrifying fragility of power and the immense personal price paid by those who wield it. The world watched, unaware of the full story, as two leaders stood on the edge of a precipice.